Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hi, I'm Larry.
Hi, I'm Renny.
And I'm Josh, and today we are going to be discussing The Zoo Story by Edward Albee. The discussion starter that I have for this is, The Zoo Story is Edward Albee's very first play, being written and performed in 1959, having been rewritten and performed many more times. There's actually a reference to Stephen King in an adapted version, in particular this version.
That's the version I looked at.
Stephen King wasn't writing at that time.
Or hadn't
He was
published at that time.
He was only 12 years old.
Yeah, he doesn't publish till the 60s.
He published his first novel in 1974. 60s, probably shorter works. This play follows an interaction between a man named Peter, sitting on a bench in Central Park, and another man named Jerry, who has just come back from the zoo and wants to tell Peter about his visit to the zoo. Only he brings up just about everything but his visit to the zoo, and even gets Peter to contribute details about his very own day and his very own life. How would you describe Jerry, and why do you believe he only spent a small portion, and by small I mean minuscule, part of the play talking about his trip to the zoo?
I'm not sure that I could answer that, but I don't think that whether he went to the zoo or not, he starts out on how he's walking, what direction he's walking in the zoo. He sits down on the bench. Peter's already there. He wants to know whether he was walking northerly or more northerly, and I guess that is something about our direction in life. I'm not entirely sure, but it might be. I think the play in general, because it is so, I hate to say, sadistic in the end, it is the theater of the absurd, probably. A prelude to Virginia Woolf, because in Virginia Woolf the characters just all tear each other apart also, very viciously. And I think maybe that this is a prelude to that. And I already said before we started to film, the minute Jerry sat down and started to talk to me that he wanted the bench and he wants to push the other guy off the bench and asks all these personal details and starts talking about killing a dog and so forth, I would have gotten up and left. I wouldn't sit there and put up with that kind of intrusion, vicious kind of intrusion into my life.
I give Peter a lot of credit, though, because he stood his ground.
Well, he did, but he's gonna end up in jail at the end.
Didn't get him anywhere.
Yeah, so he's not going to come out of this very well.
Jerry, it was pretty much suicide by
a
stranger.
By strangers.
Yeah, like suicide by cop.
Yeah. I get that feeling as much as it would be. It wouldn't be right to say it now, but I get that sense that either the zoo is psychiatric hospital, or the zoo is harping on the fact that we ourselves are animals to begin with.
Maybe. I think the zoo is also like the fair ghost. It is the metaphor for life, the carnival of life.
The only description that Jerry gives about the zoo, and I quote, "Now I'll let you in on what happened at the zoo, but first, I should tell you why I went to the zoo. I went to the zoo to find out more about the way people exist with animals, and the way animals exist with each other, and with people too. It probably wasn't a fair test, what with everyone separated by bars from everyone else. The animals for the most part from each other, and always the people from the animals. But if it's a zoo, that's the way it is." Which there's a lot that can be said about everything but an actual experience to the zoo, because the first thing people are going to think of are animals that stick out to them. But for him, it's more so details about
the relationship between people and animals.
The relationship
division.
Also that sense, even a class sense, and even a leadership sense, that some are people are equal, but some are more equal than others.
And people are animals. And at that time in the zoo, today you have monkey islands and so forth, but that time at the zoo it would have been just individual cages for the animals, so they would really have been locked up.
It's interesting. I wonder too, from reading that line again, whether Jerry sees himself as an animal to be separated.
Well,
he
certainly doesn't act with what we would call a whole lot of humanity.
No, he's not living a very humane existence. As far as
he brings just about everything else up, but he's very self-absorbed too. When him and Peter are talking, Peter's very brief with his details because he just wants
to read.
Yeah, he just wants to read and be done with the stranger.
Right.
Jerry, when it's time for him to bring things up about himself, they are so long and filled with tangents, and it's just way too much information. Me being around a lot of people, there are people that will go off on conversations that are one-sided about themselves, and probably the other person has no interest in.
No, the thing you get, I think the sense that you get from Jerry is that he does not have anybody to talk to. He's really all alone, and yet he is in a cramped space, completely surrounded by other people, but he can't talk to anybody. He doesn't have any friends, he doesn't have any family, he doesn't have anybody that he can talk to. So every once in a while, as he says, he just likes to find somebody and just unload on them.
Well, for instance, I said I wouldn't have sat with him even before he gets to talk about killing the dog, which he didn't do, but he certainly made a small attempt at it. When he first tells Peter has a pipe, and he says, well, you'll get lung cancer, and Peter says, I won't get lung cancer with this. He says, no, you'll get cancer of the mouth, so forth and so on. I would have been gone. I'm not going to sit there and have somebody tell me that, I'm going to kill myself and you're going to gloat over it.
Right. Yeah. Especially some stranger that you don't even know.
Right. It's but of course it's not meant to be actually real. It's not. I don't think those two people would have interacted with each other for any length of time. It's not meant to be real. That's why it's a one-act play.
And that's why it's absurd as well. Because I do get that sense that Jerry, he's a subject of poor health, be it physical or mental. I also think that he probably deals with some kind of substance abuse, be it alcohol or drugs, because it also makes mention of the fact that he had once been a healthy person. He looks like he had once been healthy, but has since seen a major decline.
Well, drugs in '58 when it was started probably wouldn't have been as big a deal, although you're in the city and they've always been in the city. But alcohol could certainly have been a problem.
Yeah, I mean, he's not in control of his faculties, that's for sure. So but he is alienated, and how much of that is his own fault, and how much of it is the fault of
society,
or
I
just
think a lot
circumstance.
Of it, but then again, he also made mention of the fact that when he was in his teen years, he had been in a same-sex relationship, and Albee was gay. He didn't consider himself
like Tennessee Williams,
yes,
that generation.
Albee, though, said that he didn't feel that just because of his orientation meant that his pieces had to be about being gay.
One of the criticisms of Virginia Woolf, which comes after this, was that neither he nor Tennessee Williams could really express a heterosexual relationship. And that's in the 60s when they didn't use the words homosexual or heterosexual in anything.
In this piece, Jerry spells it out. He uses another word.
No, heterosexual.
Oh, hetero, yes. The term, the word.
Yes, like I saw that quote too by Albee, but I think if that was his desire to not be known as a gay writer, I don't think he made it, because I didn't know anything about him before picking this piece up, and I was able to figure out that it was written by a gay man pretty quickly, just by that one part.
At the time, because I lived through it, actually, you would never know. Nobody ever talked about anybody's identity. They never talked about anybody's sexuality. Those things were off the table. You couldn't. Today you can go into a drugstore and you can buy prophylactics. You can buy sanitary napkins. They were in brown bags behind counters. They weren't even out and displayed, for heaven's sakes. You just didn't say them. You didn't say the words cancer. You didn't say the word cancer.
You didn't say the word pregnant either.
No, pregnant. That's right.
Even on I Love Lucy, they had to...
They had to be in separate beds. They had to have their pajamas buttoned to the top button. Yeah, and how she gets pregnant is one of those unsolved mysteries. But yes, so that he's, in whatever he's expressing, a lot of that is constrained by the time. Maybe so. It would be worse today.
Well, like I said, I was able to pick up on it pretty quickly. So at least at this piece, as far as this piece goes, if you wanted to not be a gay writer and just be a writer, then this one didn't cut the mustard there.
I don't know about that, because I was
able to tell.
You were able to tell, but that was the single mention.
That's because you know, and you've grown up knowing people of different sexuality. People just did. People got married. You put it away.
I would say that number one, that was the sole mention, even though it really said a lot about Jerry and his coming up.
His sexuality and expressing it.
This is also his first
What
play,
it was.
so he was only finding himself.
What it was that allowed me to tell was the way that he talked about how he was gay and now he can only have sex with women at one night stand.
Yes, that's true. He can't see one the second time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it was that combination of things plus the aggressive attitude that he had toward Peter.
I think that really opens something else up in the fact that means Jerry himself, he feels society is going to treat him as if he's an outcast.
I think that's where the zoo comes in. He is an outcast.
Mm-hmm. He absolutely is an outcast.
The fact that it takes him the entire play to bring up the zoo, but yet he takes everything out on Peter, and when he wants a spot on the bench, there's another bench right on the stage, but he can't go back there because there's all of these things taking place at the zoo, probably more description about the zoo than we've had in the entirety of the play.
No, that's true. And it is interesting too, Renny, that you were talking earlier about how, you just get up and leave, and how much that could be fixed with just setting this, like, instead of just at a park bench, like if it was at a bus stop. Right? If you set it at a bus stop where you couldn't leave.
Do you think it should be a more contained setting for it? Well, I think if he needs a zoo, he wants that Central Park Zoo to be part of it.
Yeah.
That's why he's in Central Park, wherever they are in Central Park.
Technically, this discussion could have and probably should have only lasted for maybe 5 minutes.
Oh, yes, if that. Because Peter is, for the most part, extremely, extremely passive. And, we are territorial. Like, when we get up to have a snack and come back, I sit here, you sit there, Josh sits here. Wherever we've sat the first time, I say to students, I don't do seating chart because most likely wherever you sat the first time you came to class, that's where you're going to sit. That's your chair.
That's often
Yes.
Yeah, and then what you feel annoyed too, right? Like
yes.
if somebody you come in the next time,
you belong it, like
and
Archie
someone's sitting in
Bunker's
your chair. Yeah.
That's right.
I've been sitting in the 4th seat on this panel for 8 years.
Yes. Peter, of course, doesn't want to leave because he was there first. He owns it. But Jerry is pushing him verbally all the time. But he won't recognize it. I would recognize it. I would say, the devil with this. But we wouldn't have a play. It's like if Hamlet just killed Claudius right off, that would take care of the play.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
It's interesting. This is the second piece that we've done with just 2 characters in not too long a period of time.
Yes,
We
because
did,
Sleuth was
Sleuth.
the other one.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
But yeah,
And there's much similarity in the baiting of and the humiliating of.
only the difference is in Sleuth, both subjects are more than willing to take part, whereas here, Peter really doesn't want anything to do with Jerry.
He wants to have the wife, so he...
Yes.
And Peter doesn't have any want that we know of except to be left alone, evidently.
And at the end, he wants that bench.
Well, that bench is his.
Yeah. But or to the point where he's willing to pick up the knife, even.
Yeah, I don't know that that's believable. It's not believable.
No.
Technically, Sleuth has 5 characters.
Well,
3 of them are played by
probably
Milo.
the same person, yes.
Right.
Because Milo even steps off stage, and
Yes.
we can figure that he impersonates. He definitely, the actor that plays him, impersonates all the characters, but I'm pretty sure that he impersonates the others
The
too.
other cops,
Yeah.
yes, but you don't see them.
Already, do we have any final thoughts?
If you're going to read Albee or see Albee, I would go for Virginia Woolf. I would go for Tiny Alice. Have you ever done Tiny Alice?
No,
I
this is
would-
our first Albee.
Albee. Well, maybe then I would suggest that for another time. I don't think that he normally does work in what we would call the theater of the absurd. There is much more plot and much more interaction in his other work, but this is a beginning work. And I'm sure it's been popular, say, with, I don't know, with high schools, but with colleges, because it's one act. You only need 2 characters, you only need a couple benches, and it's easy to produce.
Yeah, but did you know that professionally you cannot produce this play anymore? You have to do it as part of a 2-act.
Oh, yes, there is another act thing
Yeah,
that was created afterwards.
Yeah, for Peter. It's about Peter because he feels like this is really about Jerry. And Jerry's really fleshed out, he says. Albee is a real 3-dimensional character, but Peter's just a sounding board. So he wanted to give Peter something. So now, professionally, if you wanted to produce this play, you cannot. You have to only produce it with...
In tandem?
Yeah, in tandem. But amateur, you could do just this piece. But you cannot do just the other piece.
The second part is Peter.
Yeah, I guess you would need the first part to have the second part.
Yeah, it would be the first part would be the Peter part.
Alrighty. How would we rate this? 0 to 5 stars, half stars permitted, Larry?
I would go with 2. I'll go 2 stars. It gives you an idea of what it might be like to be all alone in New York City and the kind of desperate alienation that you might feel. But I don't think there's anything else really to get out of it than that.
I would give it a 3 because it is Edward Albee, and he's not a first-rank American dramatist, but he's certainly in the high second rank today. A couple of his plays, especially that were turned into movies, have become signature events also. But I don't think Zoo Story by itself is the only Albee piece that you would want to be familiar with.
He's also adapted literature into plays as well. I'm going to give this a 4. I think that this was very entertaining and thought-provoking. I think that the subjects of Peter and Jerry really drive this between a passive person that just wants to have a nice peaceful time reading on the bench and someone that comes up to him randomly and just keeps extending and extending the discussion to the point that they don't get to where they want to go. It's the quintessential irritating stranger that pretty much consumes your life and then pretty much by the very end has consumed his life.
Mm-hmm.
But you like this absurd, and I
Yes.
don't.
Exactly.
I do like the, and
I think me and Renny are on the same team.
I think that there's a lot to get out of it as far as actual brain food to take out if this is concerned.
So far, Rhinoceros is the only one that I've seen any real value in.
Have
you read that?
Where it doesn't make
I saw that
sense,
originally.
it
I've
makes
never
more
read
sense
it,
than
but
anything.
I saw it, yes.
Did you like that one?
Yes.
Okay.
But I told you, with Waiting for Godot, I never saw the end of it either time I went to see it. But I don't think I would see the end of Zoo Story either. I would have gotten up and left.
Already. If you're interested in checking this out, this is the first volume of the collected plays of Edward Albee. This features The Zoo Story, The Death of Bessie Smith, The Sandbox, The
Yes,
American
the
Dream,
Sandbox, I saw.
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, The Ballad of the Sad Cafe, Tiny Alice, and Malcolm. The Ballad of the Sad Cafe and Malcolm are adaptations of different existing novels. The Ballad of the Sad Cafe was a novella written by Carson McCullers. James Purdy was the one that wrote Malcolm. That's what the name is mentioned here. Be sure to join us next time on another episode of Literary Gladiators. For now, keep reading.
Thank you.